David's section will not be made public because it's he's dealing with some quite sensitive information, and that wouldn't be appropriate to share. So just to reassure you on that front. And final thing to say is if you could write your name and organisation in the chat box, and also we are interested in what topics and areas you would like to cover in future meetings. So if you want to put those in the chat box, or maybe raise them during some of the discussion areas later when there's time, that would be much appreciated. But I will now hand over to Jane and turn off my camera. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. So this is our third webinar. Delighted we've got over 40 of you here today. So thank you for sparing us your time. As Adrian said, I don't have many slides today, so I'm just going to share my screen, but really there's not a lot. So hopefully you can see that now. Yep. As Adrian just mentioned, so last week we entered into a very short-term contract with Adrian because we felt that, we felt that in terms of the work that we're currently doing, the team could do with a little bit of support, because one of the areas that we're really interested in is the power of community, and we believe that everything we're seeing during the current crisis is absolutely testament to the power of community that is working across Oxfordshire at this moment. So once again, we'd like to thank all of you that are doing such great work helping and meeting needs which maybe we hadn't imagined before. But just to go over, so yes, so Adrian, who many of you will know, is now working with us for the short term, and the idea really is just to give us a little bit of extra resource, thinking about how we can understand everything that we're learning currently, and build on that in terms of our own strategic thinking, but in particular trying to identify what we're going to call some of the anchor organisations that we know are leading on impact across the county. And many of you might already know that we've obviously got two programmes already, Growing Minds and the Oxford Homeless Movement, which are working in a very collaborative way with charities on particular problems. And that's very much what we would like to see, the legacy of all of the work that we're doing now with you and everyone else in trying to find the best solution to some of the problems we're seeing. So we welcome Adrian and thanking him for his extra time that he's bringing to the team. So that's Adrian. Just to recap, obviously the idea of these Wednesday webinars is just to sort of share what we're doing in terms of the Resilience Fund. And I think by now most of you will understand that we're trying to look at it in two ways. Obviously helping organisations that are responding and enabling them to do that better, and with the resources they need to do that. But also we're very mindful, and I think this is where we come back to the power of community, that the voluntary sector is much needed, and we want to make sure that it exists long and after the crisis is over. So a lot of our focus as we move through, especially these weekly sessions, will be to try and understand what organisations are doing, can do, and what more can we do together to actually ensure that the sector is able to rebuild, recover, and obviously have some resilience in it. So I think that those are sort of critical things. They're very much the focus of the grant applications that we're seeing. And I think what we wanted to do today was actually to have more of a question and answer session, because we're conscious that maybe on the, especially last week, there was quite a lot of information to take in and it perhaps wasn't as interactive. So we would like to try and make that happen today. So quickly moving on, the grants that we've now awarded is sort of just shy of 200,000, which is hopefully a good amount. I think the team have been working really hard, and what we're going to do is we're just sharing as the totals increase. That's the sort of weekly total that we're now at, and you'll see that it's amounts that we awarded up to today, and the ones that we know we're going to award by the end of this week are on the right hand side of the slide. So lots of activity, again, all over the county, down to Henley, Banbury, Bicester, Benson. So good spread again. And again, all of the applications can be seen on our website. As we said last week, we are uploading them to 360 Giving, which is really important. So The other thing I wanted to mention, we did mention it last week as well, is that the National Emergencies Trust are becoming quite a significant funder of the work in Oxfordshire. And I would like to send our thanks today to all of their donors and corporate supporters. And the amount that's actually come into Oxfordshire is now 142,560, which is much appreciated. We also wanted just to mention that we do have a charity checkout online donation page. And it's really important that I wanted to really thank individuals that are going on there and making small donations, and many of them are anonymous. So I think it's really important that we take the opportunity to thank them, reach out to them, and say that they are making a difference. I think there was, the latest one was from a lady in Whitney who had been tagged in an Instagram 5K mile run in Whitney, and decided to put her £5 to the fund, but also to tag 5 other people to also donate. And I guess that's what we mean by the power of community, actually. Together, if we collectively pool all our resources, then we really can do some fantastic things. And that contributes just as much to the grants that we've been able to make as the money from NET. So that's really all, I think, today from me.
And the next person we've got speaking is Roz Warren from Charity Mentors, who's going to talk a little bit about the work they do. Now, Roz, are you okay you are unmuted and you've turned your camera on. So I will stop my video and mute my camera, mute my microphone, and hand over to Roz Warren from Charity Mentors. Thank you.
Hi, thanks very much indeed for inviting Charity Mentors to participate. I think I probably know quite a few of you on the call today, and even if I've not met you, if you've worked with one of our mentors, because I'm the coordinator and the first port of call, I'll have spoken to you on the telephone to talk about how we might be able to help you and to match you with one of our mentors. So, well, I think the events of the last few weeks have probably left many of us feeling as though we've had the stuffing knocked out of us. And with so much uncertainty, it's pretty hard, I think, for people who have to make decisions about the long-term future for their organisations to really get a grip on what to do for the best. And that's one of the ways that Charity Mentors can actually help. So, in response to the current situation, what we've done is we've flexed the way that that our mentoring works. So if you'd like to speak to one of our mentors, just for a one-off, just to get some help with that, getting a grip and thinking through some of your more short-term decisions, then we're able to do that. So. But our more normal way of working is that we match you with a mentor over a 4 to 6 month period to give you a chance just to step back, to shake off the sort of the day-to-day, and to enable you to focus with the help of an outside and experienced person to think about longer-term strategic issues. And that is not going to go away after COVID-19. So we've been going since 2013. We've worked with well over 150 different voluntary and charity organisations in Oxfordshire, with more than 100 different charity leaders. And we work with the person who's responsible for making long-term decisions about the future of the organisation. So that could be the CEO or manager or the chair. And perhaps some of you might not be aware of this because it's a relatively new thing. We're also offering joint mentoring projects between the chair and with the chair and the CEO working together. And I should say that all these services are absolutely free of charge. So, in summary then, just, how can Charity Mentors help? It's the idea of having an eye to the future and not selling forth blindly because the future is too uncertain or too complicated. It's about getting some clarity and some confidence that you're focusing your limited resources in the right place. And that might mean working with a mentor to review and sense check an existing plan or existing thinking, or it might mean thinking afresh about how you're going to bring things back together again in a world that is undoubtedly going to look very different to the one we were planning for just a few months ago. So if you are interested, then check out our website, because you'll see people there that you know that we've worked with. It's www.charitymentors.co.uk, or just get in touch with me directly. So my name's Roz, and my email is roz@charitymentors.co.uk. So that's it really, I think.
Thank you, Roz. That's really good to hear, and we'll hopefully post the link in the email in the chat box so people can see them. The last 15 minutes or so we've got is very much an open session. So if you have questions for Roz or Jane, if you have questions about the Resilience Fund, or if you have suggestions for future meetings and topics you might want to see covered, then this is a pretty open session. And really, we don't have a electronic hand raise ability, so unmute yourself and start talking, or post a message in the chat box and we will respond. Jane, do you want to kick off by just talking about the £750 million fund the government announced?
Yeah, I have been having a little chat in the chat box, and I think it's fair to say, whilst this was welcomed by many of the charitable bodies, so NCVO and NPC and others, it was also commented that it was obviously nowhere near enough. And I would like to think it's just the start of the government acknowledging that they need to be providing support to the sector. The particular question was, how might organisations in Oxfordshire access the funds? And our understanding at the moment is that some of that, not a significant proportion of it, but some of it will be distributed via the National Emergencies Trust. So that in its very nature will become available to OCF as it gets divided out amongst the community foundations. We are aware that significant portions going to the National Communities Fund, so formerly the lottery, so they will obviously be running grant rounds as well. But as soon as we have more details, then we can share those. But yeah, always scant on detail when it's initially launched, I think is the honest answer to that. Perhaps just picking up from, I think, Roz's point that she was alluding to, and I think we would really find this helpful for the Community Foundation, as we're now looking at many applications a day, trying to understand what charity boards are thinking of in terms of their reserves, their plans, whether they're having to change their plans, as we know you are. But if there's any organisation that would be willing to talk about some of the things that concern them actually about the future, what are you taking the time? I think last week Pat from Citizens Advice in Banbury was sort of suggesting that everyone does take a pause and really begin to think about, what are the services that are going to be most needed? How might your organisation be looking like in 6 months, 9 months down the road? So, is anyone actually doing any of that at the moment? Does anyone want to sort of share? As we said, this is a very safe space for, lots of different people, ears and eyes. They might be thinking it too. Good place to sort of share where we're at.
Jane, could I come in? James here. I think the main thing that we're kind of looking at with Sophia is that the picture and the opportunity is so huge that nobody can do it independently and individually, and therefore we have to work much more collaboratively, very much to David's point earlier. And it sort of feels as though, with just very quickly scanning through the list of mentors that are on the Charity Mentors website, there are people from the public sector, from private sector, from finance to marketing, and all sorts of people in there. And it sort of feels as though there is a collective expertise that probably we haven't really mapped and identified. But I think that coming out of this, my view is I would be really saddened to see the old ways, so public sector going back to Serco, Capita, G4S, Atos, Compass, and all those organisations, when the sector that's held this whole issue together has been the voluntary sector. And I think we have a real place to stand up and become a service provider of choice, of first choice, because we're not taking dividends, we're not taking large bonuses, and therefore we stand on our own as a very cohesive sector, and it should be seen as a cohesive sector, not a large number of small organizations. So we need to be considered as the hive, not a lot of individual bees doing their own collecting. And I don't know how we get that together, but I think that's a really important thing to come out of this.
And I think, James, in reassurance, that's where we started this afternoon, was trying to get to a point where we feel we can articulate the power of community. And by community, we mean all of those, charitable, cooperative, social organisations that have such a large role to play in all of this. So yep. I think that's sort of where we hope that we may be able to get to in terms of a legacy from all of this.
Okay, and just then following on from what you've said, I think that we understand that maybe as a sector, but I think that the traditional commissioners may not have that front and centre, and they may be sitting in furlough or sort of waiting for the issues, the health conditions to abate and the lockdown to be lifted, and then they will go back to business as usual, which will not be inviting the voluntary sector to be part of the table and part of the decision making and the decision production and the whole design process. And I think we need to be very much front and center in their minds, not just in our own.
Yeah. And I think it's an opportunity for new players to come up with new ideas. I know that we have been joined on the call today by Huggy. I don't know whether Paul wants to say a word about what it is that you might be able to offer, and to find out whether that's something that charities in Oxfordshire might find helpful as we're looking at how to supply food in different ways.
Yeah, I can do. And thank you, Jane, for inviting us onto this call. It's actually in response to an email that we sent earlier today, and we sent out to a few charities or umbrella organisations or trusts allocating funds out to charities. I'll very quickly describe what it is that we do. We're called HUG. We've got lots of G's because you can't trademark it until there's 3 of them. That's the reality about our branding. And we're actually a micro gifter. We're a technology business, a micro gifting platform. And what we normally facilitate is we make it possible for things to be enjoyed in the real world, like a cup of coffee or dinner or something like that, but where it starts its journey as a digital redeemable, and we sell into things like loyalty schemes. And if you click to spend your points inside Nectar or inside a Virgin loyalty scheme, you might be calling on our technology in the background to actually get that product, that restaurant voucher, that whatever it might be. When the coronavirus problem really started to bite in the UK, one of the things that happened very quickly was that there was a huge problem in trying to close down schools, insofar as that there were children, 1.3 million children have free school meals in the UK, and replacing those free school meals was one of the major reasons why schools weren't closed any earlier than they actually were. What happened in response was we understood that head teachers were panicking about trying to replace that food provision, and consequently we decided that our platform was not built for that at all, but it was probably perfectly placed to be able to do that. So we got the whole team working on it, and within a week we had a working solution up and ready, and we started to support thousands of children in or rather their families in having supermarket vouchers seamlessly delivered to those parents by the schools. Off the back of that, we found out that there was a much wider food problem in the country, wherein those children weren't just being fed by the state at lunchtime, they were being fed by breakfast clubs and corporate sponsored and charity sponsored breakfast clubs in the morning. for breakfast time, and also in some instances during school holidays and other things. And so we got really kind of into this problem of, we created a method for supermarket vouchers to be an infill or a proxy where you can't get actual food. It's obviously desirable to get food parcels or prepared food to children or families or whoever it is that needs it, but supermarket vouchers have become one of the more scalable and reliable proxies for it, and we have a platform that can do it really well. So we just waived all of our platform fees and opened this up to people. And we happened to contact Jane this morning about it to say, are there any charities in your network that would find that helpful?
So I think that was the point, Paul, wasn't it? That obviously we've got lots of charities that are delivering food and distributing food, like Sophia, but we know that there are also, Pat talked last week, doing local arrangements with the co-op. So I think the offer is out there if anybody wants to follow up with Paul, then that's something. It is using technology. It's another alternative which might make us have a better response, which again is one of our objectives.
Shane, we've got a couple of questions on the resilience
on the fund. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, one from Justine, who's got her hand up, and then one from Brian in the chat.
That's what I saw. Yeah.
So Justine, do you want to ask, and then Jane can come back on both the two questions.
Hello, yeah, hi. So I'm Justine. I'm from the old fire station, Arts at the old fire station.
Hi there.
Nice to meet you. I had a question about the fact that the fund is separated out into these two strands. I don't know if anyone else is in the position where, as a charity, we are actually okay at the moment. We're very fortunate in that we have cash in the bank. Lots of our staff are being furloughed. And so we, at the moment, are able to survive, but we're worried about the future. And we think that we qualify for the Recover Stronger element of the fund. We haven't been very successful with OCF funding in the past. So but I think that in terms of this, that we do qualify, particularly as the City Council are now using us as a distribution hub, as well as thinking about the future when we do reopen as an arts centre that supports people experiencing homelessness. So I think we qualify under those terms, but I didn't know if you were in a position at the moment to divvy it up between who needs urgent help now and who needs help to get back on their feet once things sort of normalise. So I didn't know if it was possible to kind of get clarification on that, or arrange a kind of informal conversation about it, rather than kind of go through the application process and make you read a big long application that we might not qualify for. So just wanted to get some clarification on that, really. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a common question that we're anticipating, and I can see one or two of my trustees are also on the call here, so if anyone wants to step in. I think what we were trying to do at the outset was not make any organisation feel that they were having to apply for one or other phase. It's very much our sort of strategy that we want to consider the sector as a whole, and obviously some of the things that we know need funding are all about now. But for the sector to actually recover and rebuild and be there in the future, we know that some organisations will struggle. And that's partly, again, why we've added a little more resource into the teams to understand who those organisations are, and maybe where we haven't worked with them in the past to really understand that. So I think it's definitely worth always talking to us. And to be honest, an application is perhaps the easiest way to start the dialogue, because it then captures organisations that are thinking about these things. Because I know that Roz mentioned, it's really important that organisations have a plan, that they think about where they're going. And sometimes it's quite difficult to capture that in an application, but I know the team have been thinking about it themselves, that the application, while we've tried to make it really simple, there will be occasions where we do need to come back and ask further questions to understand, exactly why an organisation might be thinking to do the things that they want to do at this time or in the future. So I don't know if that helps, but I think we want to listen and we want to understand where organisations are.
Thanks, Jane. And Justine, just to say that obviously this is part of the work I've been brought in to do and look at is how we do recover stronger. And certainly some of the things the old fire station are doing have been mentioned to me by one or two people as being very interesting. So you were on my kind of longer list of people to talk to at some point. So I'll put my email in the chat box, and do drop me a line, and a conversation with you and Jeremy at some point would be really useful. And if anyone else wants to make contact, then you'll have my details as well. Jane, the question from Brian about resilience funds being limited to 1 month initially, what duration should people be thinking of now?
Yeah, so I think that the team have sort of come back and clarified that, and again, this was more about because we really understood that in the first sort of couple of weeks, we wanted to help those organisations who actually needed to really, get stuff out there. But I think we've turned that now to sort of short to medium term. So maybe it's the next sort of 2 to 3 months, which again follows on from what Roz was saying, that actually we have to be understanding that organisations are really thinking just not about next week, but they do have a plan, in terms of their staff or the resources that they have to do the things that they perhaps hadn't been planning, but are obviously going to have to maybe stop some of the things that were in their plans. So it would help us understand that.
Thank you. Justine, Brian, are you, has that answered your questions, or anything you'd like to follow up with?
No, that's really helpful. Thank you so much. I'll contact you separately, Adrian, if that's okay. Thank you so much.
Please do.
Yeah, that's fine, Adrian and Jane. Some of the foundations at the moment are saying they're putting everything onto pause, so it does look like the next 3, 4, 5 months there won't be too many. Certainly of our planned submissions, they won't be being submitted. So I guess it would take away some extra need is going to be coming towards you, I think.
Right. And do you mean other funders? So you mean some of the national funders, regional funders?
Yes. Yeah, some of the larger foundations are sending out messages now that they will not be considering grants. So, for us, we have 3 or 4 in mind that we've worked with before. I think charities are in a stronger position with those that have sponsored them before. That's also one of the messages that's coming out. Yeah. Some are saying that they will not entertain submissions from charities that haven't worked with before. So I guess there's a loyalty in that, which is good if you're already established.
Yeah, if it's any consolation, I am familiar. I know the Swire Charitable Trust. I don't know if that's one of the ones that you're mentioning, but I know that they've made a decision to make a grant to the National Emergencies Trust.
Right.
So indirectly, whilst they might be pausing their own applications, I think a lot of funders have decided that perhaps they're not best placed to respond in a local context.
Yeah.
And I think that is, incredibly rewarding for the community foundation to think then, well, actually some of those funds will flow back into Oxfordshire via ourselves and be made available to organisations that are on the board. So yeah. So
from an Oxfordshire point of view, Jane, I didn't know if you'd heard about the YOF monies. I've sent a couple of emails, but I appreciate that people are really busy. But for YOF monies, that was £1 million handed to be handed out, and whilst I think everybody who was successful was communicated with, there's been no communication since. I didn't know if you guys were aware of what was happening there.
I'm not familiar at the moment with that, but if you want to message in the chat, we'll follow through on that perhaps.
Okay, yeah, great, thank you.
Thank you. I mean, the other question we had was topics for future meetings, which maybe not, something you can answer now if people have any thoughts, or do drop me a line or other people a line about what you'd like to cover in these meetings. I think we are at time, aren't we? We're 45 minutes is scheduled, but happy to carry on a little longer if people have issues they'd like to raise.
Just a quick one here, going back to Brian about the Youth Opportunity Fund. Probably the quickest one is to send Mark Gray an email. We were unsuccessful, but I'm not sure what his where the applications were successful, but I have a feeling that they were kind of small funds distributed to many organisations.
Yeah, we were successful, James, because
congratulations.
Our bid was for running a youth club in Didcot for the next 2 years.
Yeah.
But having been told we're successful, nothing's followed up. And I did put an alternative to them about how we might spend those monies in the meantime. So I was interested to hear their thinking.
Sorry, it's Sam Shepherd here from Oxfordshire County Council.
Hello.
So I'm happy to pick that up and take it away. And if I circulate an answer, who am I best to send that to?
Do you want to send it to us, Sam, and then we can disseminate it to everyone?
No problem. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Sam.
Okay, that is the power of community, isn't it?
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Roz. Thank you, David, who's now left us. And thank you, Jane. And thank you, everyone, for turning out. And we will be continuing these meetings on a weekly basis. And, you know, if you have questions or comments, please do share them in advance or during the meeting. And it'd be great to hear from you and make sure that these meetings are meeting whatever needs you have in terms of understanding and responding to the situation as effectively as possible. Jane, do you have any final words?
Yeah, I mean, I think just keep telling us what you're doing. It's hopefully you found even everything that ACT are doing. You know, there's so much great stuff going on, and I think the more that we can share the stories of how Oxfordshire is responding, that is also very much needed, especially for the National Emergencies Trust. I learned that they've vastly increased their fundraising efforts, so their activities and the growth in their funds is really going to be anticipated. But to do that, they need stories, and it would be really great that the Community Foundation can keep sharing stories about what you're doing. And hence these webinars, actually, because it would be really good to invite many more of the people and organisations that have received grants during this time, just to talk about what they've been able to do with those funds and how they've helped local people. So that's our plea, really. We want to help you, but you can also help us by, you know, just sharing the great things that you're doing, because people need to know about it. So thank you, and see you next week.
Thanks very much, everybody. Have a good week.
Thanks all. Bye for now.